hypothesis and the conclusion. So let us define first what is a conditional statement. So pag sinabi natin conditional statement, nagbibigay siya ng condition. Okay? So we can come up with a conclusion. Okay? So parang nagbibigay siya ng pag ganito, ganyan, so ano ang maiisip mong conclusion doon? That's why it's called conditional. Okay? So a conditional statement is a compound statement of the form if P, then Q, where P and Q are the statements. So, pag sinabi natin conditional statement, it is a compound. Ibig sabihin, pinagsama. So, meron tayong dalawang statements. Ano yung dalawang statement na yun? Yun po yung P natin at yung Q. Okay? So, if P, then Q. Okay? So, this is the condition. Okay? So, if P, this is your first statement, then Q, this is your second statement. So, pinagsama siya, that's why it's called compound. So, pinagsama siyang statement. So, pag meron tayo noon, that is what we call the conditional statement. So, remember that the first statement, which is your P, so ito po yung P natin, ito po siya, is called the hypothesis and usually begins with if. So, tatandaan po na kapag meron tayong statement or conditional statement and then nakita mo yung word na if, yung kasunod niya na statement, that is your hypothesis. Kasi kadalasan, ang hypothesis natin ay makikita mo after ng word na if. Okay? While the second statement, which is your Q, ito po siya, okay? This is usually begins with then. Okay, so kung sa hypothesis if, sa conclusion natin, then po ang makikita natin. So after ng then, yung kasunod niya na statement, that is what we call the conclusion. Okay, so tatandaan na yung P po natin is your hypothesis, which is usually begins with if, and then yung atin pong conclusion, which is your Q, which is usually begins with then. Okay, let's have an example. So if I have here a conditional statement, so if, okay, so if this is your statement, this is your hypothesis, which is your P, then this is your statement, this is your conclusion, this is your Q. Okay, so if hypothesis, then conclusion. Okay, so if hypothesis, then conclusion. So, madali nating ma-identify sa hypothesis kasi madalas after siya ng word na if, at sa conclusion, madalas after siya ng word na then. Okay. Now, remember that the words if and then are not part of the hypothesis and conclusion. So, kapag nag-identify po tayo ng hypothesis and conclusion, yung hypothesis po natin, ito lang po. Hindi po natin isasama si if. Ganon din po kay conclusion. So, hindi po kasama si then. Okay? So, let us define what is hypothesis. It is a tentative assumption made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. So, ito po yung nagbibigay tayo ng tawag nito condition. So, kapag ganito, if, kaya nga if, okay? Or when, minsan when ang makikita natin dyan. When the grass is green, ganyan, then the sky is blue. Ganon. So, madalas if, minsan may mababasa tayong when. So, yun ang mga parang pinaka-palatandaan natin that yung next statement niya is the hypothesis. Okay? So, if it's after if or when. Okay? Now, so, hypothesis, ito yung magbibigay siya ng assumption. So, magbibigay siya ng description, definition, or a condition. Okay? While the conclusion, this is the necessary consequence of one or more propositions takes as premises. So, from here, from your hypothesis, meron ka ngayong makukonclude. So, from your hypothesis, ano yung nabuo mong konsepto? O ano yung result? Or ano yung possible na mangyari? That is the conclusion. Okay? Out of the assumption or conditions or anong tawag nito? Mga definitions. Ano yung concept na mabubuo mo or ano yung conclusion? Or what are the possible result? Okay? So, yun po yung ating conclusion. What can you conclude out of the given hypothesis? Okay? So, let's start. So, let us identify the hypothesis and conclusion. So, let's have number 1. If a number is greater than 0, then the number is positive. So, again, your hypothesis, which is your P, that is always after if, kung nandyan si if, and then since meron tayong then madali natin ma-identify si Q, yung ating conclusion. So, ganito, para mas madali nating maintindihan, yung hypothesis, i-underline natin, yung P. Yung ating conclusion, ibabox natin, which is your Q. So, you can see it clearly. Okay? So, if a number is greater than 0, underline natin sa hypothesis, that is your P, kasi after if, and then after then, that is your conclusion, the number is positive. So, this is your Q, this is your conclusion. Okay? So, kapag ganyan, binigyan kayo ng statement, conditional statement, and then you are asked to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. So, tingnan nyo kung may if at then. Kasi yun ang pinaka madaling, anong tawag nito? Q. Okay? Yun ang pinaka madaling Q para malang, ay, ito, this is the hypothesis kasi may if. After if. And then, conclusion after then. Okay, so, therefore, the hypothesis is the number is greater than 0. And then, your conclusion is the number is positive. Okay, sometimes you have to rewrite or rephrase your hypothesis and conclusion. So, make sure na i-construct natin siya ng maayos. Okay? And then number 2, if the base angles of a triangle are equal, then the triangle is isosceles. Okay? So, our hypothesis here, which is your P, is the base angles of a triangle are equal. Our conclusion, box natin, the triangle is isosceles. So, this is your Q. This is your conclusion. Okay, so therefore, your hypothesis is the base angles of a triangle are equal. Your conclusion is the triangle is isosceles. Okay, so madali siyang ma-identify kapag may if at then. Next, if 3 times the quantity of n plus 1 is equal to 6, then n is equal to 1. So, sabi ko nga pag-conclusion, result din siya, no? Possible result. Okay? So, therefore, this is your hypothesis. That is your P. Then, n is equal to 1, this is your conclusion. Okay? So, therefore, your hypothesis is 3 times the quantity of n plus 1 is equal to 6, and then your conclusion is n is equal to 1. Alright? Let's have another. So, what if the words if and then are not present in the given statement? So, paano kapag hindi mo nakita si if and then? Eh, di ba, ma'am, mas madaling makita yung hypothesis at conclusion kasi yung hypothesis after ni if. Yung conclusion after ni then. What if hindi given si if at then? So, ito po siya. Dapat alam pa rin natin kung paano mag-identify ng hypothesis at conclusion. So, I have here, getting enough sleep is good to your health. Okay. So, which one do you think is yung hypothesis and conclusion? Pag sinabing conclusion, ito yung kalalabasan. Okay? Ito yung possible result. Or ito yung makukonclude mo. So, therefore, this is your P, this is your hypothesis, this is your conclusion. Okay? So, para magkaroon ka ng malusog na pangangatawan, then you're supposed to get enough sleep. Okay? So, dapat marunong din po tayong mag-identify ng hypothesis and conclusion even without the word if and then. Okay? So, kagaya nito, getting enough sleep is good to your health. So, ito po siya. So, this is your P hypothesis, this is your Q, which is your conclusion. Kasi, ito yung kalalabasan. Magiging malusog ka or maayos ang pangangatawan mo pag meron kang tamang tulog. Okay? So, therefore, our hypothesis is getting enough sleep. Our conclusion is good to your health. Okay? So, aalisin na po natin yung is. Okay? Next, number 5. So an integer that ends in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 is an odd integer. So our hypothesis here, your P is an integer that ends in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So anong concept ito? Add integer. So this is your conclusion. This is your Q. Okay, so your hypothesis is an integer that ends in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And your conclusion, it is an odd integer. So, i-rephrase natin, i-reconstruct natin yung ating sentence. So, minsan kailangan po natin gawin yun. So, kagaya nito, is an odd integer. So, pwede kang gumamit ng mga pronoun. It, she, he, mga ganun po. So, it is an odd integer. Okay?
If you watch this video carefully, then you will definitely understand this topic. Wait, what did I just say? Okay, let me write it for you. I said, if you watch this video carefully, then you will definitely understand this topic. So what am I doing here? I'm talking about a condition and a respective outcome. So what are such statements involving an if condition and an outcome called? Yes, such statements are called conditional statements. Now, in this statement, can you tell me what the condition is? Yes, it's if you watch this video carefully. And what's the outcome? Yes, you will definitely understand this topic. Let's denote this statement as P and this one as Q. So can you tell me now, how can we represent a conditional statement? Yes, we can represent it as if P then Q, where P is the condition and Q is the outcome. Now, I want you to be a little more attentive here. In this statement, if P occurs, then what will be its implication? The implication of occurrence of P would be the occurrence of Q. So can we say that Q is nothing but the implication of P? That is, the occurrence of P implies the occurrence of Q. So we can write this as P implies Q. Mathematically, we can also write it as this, which is read as P implies Q, which means that if P happens, then Q will definitely happen. That is, if P, then Q. Okay, now that we know what a conditional statement is, can we think of a few more examples? Here's the first one. If I study well, then I will pass. And how about this? If a player commits a foul, then she is penalized. Simple, isn't it? Do share with us the examples you came up with. Now let me tell you that the conditional statements may also be of the form P only if Q or P if and only if Q. But we will see them in the videos to come. For now, let's see what converse statements are. We just saw what if-then conditional statements are, that is, statements of the form if P then Q. Now can you tell me for this statement, if Q then P is also true? That is, whether the converse of the statement is also true? Yes, for a statement of the form if P then Q, its converse statement would be if Q then P, that is, Q implies P. It's nothing but interchanging conditions and the outcome. Simply put, it means that if Q happens, then P also happens. Now let's see whether the converse statement is also true. Let's find out. Consider the first example again. If you watch this video carefully, then you will understand this topic. Now what would Q implies P or the converse for this statement be? Yes, the converse would be, if I understood this topic, then I watched the video carefully. But is this true? I'm afraid not. And why do I say so? Let's understand. By watching the video carefully, you will definitely understand this topic. But that is just one way of doing it. You may understand this topic by watching other videos or from some book or from any other source, but need not be this video necessarily. Thus, we can say that for the statement P implies Q, the converse of the statement, that is, Q implies P, need not be true. Let's take one more example for clarity. Consider this statement. If Ronaldo plays well, then Juventus will win. What would be the converse of this statement? Yes, it would be, if Juventus won, then Ronaldo played well. Can you tell me whether the converse of this statement has to be true? Of course not. Let's understand why. Ronaldo playing well is one of the sufficient conditions for Juventus to win. That is, if Ronaldo plays well, then Juventus will win regardless of the other conditions. But does that mean it's the only condition for Juventus to win? Right, it isn't the only condition. Juventus may also win because of the other players performing well, or the opponents not playing well, or some other reason, even though Ronaldo may not play well. So again, we see that for the statement P implies Q, we cannot say that Q also implies P. That is, converse need not be true. So now we know what an if-then statement is and also its converse. In our next video, we will see what inverse and contrapositive statements are.